This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. How are you? I hope you're well. Not long until our senior men are back in action. Australia and Italy at home, both at Wembley. And as normal, I'll be releasing a preview for it in the normal fashion. I'll be taking a look at Gareth's squad and I'm planning on speaking with some people who know our opponents a little better than I do. I personally think this is one of those features that makes the podcast what it is. I enjoy chatting with these people. I'll be honest, it can be a little hard work at times to organise, but I hope you find it worthwhile, enjoyable, rewarding, I don't know, especially when it's coupled with an away game. But that'll have to wait until next month, November, when I hope to guide you around the city of Skopje in Macedonia, to tell you the places to see, places to go, things to eat, things to drink, that sort of thing. That's what we like to do on those away previews. So looking forward to that one. Thank you for all the recent comments on the podcast, be it the Lionesses ones or the one where I spoke with Michael Galway about his book on the 2006 World Cup Golden Generations. If you've not heard them, they are available at your podcast provider of choice or threelionspodcast.com. As I say, thank you very much for all those comments. It's really kind. Thank you very much. Before I crack open this feature, I just wanted to cover a couple of things. The under-21s are in action soon. They face Serbia at Nottingham Forest's City Ground. Then in November, it's been announced that they will face Northern Ireland at Everton's Goodison Park in Liverpool, which is an interesting choice of venues. Obviously, Everton have a new ground being built, so it's an opportunity one last time for England to grace a great old stadium. In fact, it's one that I've actually never visited. I need to pull my finger out if I'm going to tick that one off. But England's senior side have actually played 12 times at Goodison, the last time being back in 1973. And that got me thinking, maybe one day I'll look at some of England's other home venues through the years, maybe as a feature. But I mention Goodison being an interesting venue, as for those listening outside of England, Everton, well, they're based in the city of Liverpool. And it's been a topic of discussion for some time now. I don't know how far it goes back, but there is a percentage of Liverpudlians, a high percentage, I don't know, who don't associate themselves with the country of England and our national team. It's their own choice, of course, but it doesn't stop their players being picked for England duty. Of course, there is currently Trent Alexander-Arnold, Jordan Henderson recently, Steven Gerrard as we go back in time, Emlyn Hughes, Kevin Keegan. They all came from the red side. Everton from the blue side. Maybe haven't had so many of late, but of course there's been Wayne Rooney, Phil Neville, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Nick Barmby, Ross Barkley, Leighton Baines as well. You could say Liverpool's view from some of its population is much like Naples' view to the Italian national team. To get an insight into that, maybe, I don't know, go check out the preview episode of our away match against Italy back in March. But yeah, just the fact that the under-21s are playing in Liverpool, I found quite an interesting choice of venue. Be interesting to see what the reaction is come that game. Right, let's move on to this episode and feature. A while back, I came up with the idea of Your England Journey. A feature of episodes speaking with fans about how they encountered England, their earliest memories, and what stories they've had along the way following our national team. With regards to the podcast, I'd like to try and put one episode out a week so it doesn't clog up your feed and each episode gets a fair amount of time to be digested. But I didn't account for the Lionesses to get all the way to the World Cup final, followed by the seniors preview and review for Ukraine and Scotland. Then likewise there was the recent Lionesses Nations League games. So I had a few of these Your England Journey recordings ready to go, but didn't have the time to fit them in until now. So this is the first one I recorded with England fan Matt Freeman. So apologies it's taken so long, mate, to get it out. But if you'd like to share your England journey, stick with us and I'll let you know how you can do it after this. Now, there's good times, sad times, fun times. They are, of course, your times. Welcome to Your England Journey on the Three Lions podcast. Derby, an England fan, Matt Freeman. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Russell. How are you doing?
Oh, very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, doing good myself. Thank you very much for having me on.
No, more than welcome. It's always good to hear from fellow fans, and I enjoy sort of hearing their sort of backstory, as it were, about how they come to follow England. Obviously, when people follow their club sides, usually is probably where they're born, where they're brought up, or maybe through sort of family sort of inheritance, as it were. But once you've sort of started on that journey, then some people kind of find England, don't they? Either through, I don't know, again, through family or through basically tournaments on the telly. But yeah, take us to your first England memory. Where does that fit in?
Well, growing up overseas, my parents, my dad worked in the engineering department at Rolls-Royce, aeronautical engineering. So he was one of the representatives. So we moved around a lot as kids.
Oh yeah.
Me and my brother and sister. So growing up overseas, we lived in Dubai in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. Now, being born in sort of like 1995, I never got to see Euro 96. My brother's got fond memories of that tournament. Again, World Cup 98, Euro 2000. I was still a little bit too young to have any sort of recollection of any of those tournaments.
Yeah.
But living overseas, a lot of the time, you know, in the early 2000s, YouTube wasn't a thing. You know, you didn't get highlights of football as regularly as you can. You know, go on Twitter now, go on YouTube, go on Facebook, whichever social media platform you want to. But what was shown were the big tournaments. So for me, my sort of first love of football was the first sort of big game watching England play. And that was against Brazil in the quarterfinals of the World Cup in 2002. Yeah. So it was, you know, even as a kid who's not really been grown up with football day in, day out, you know who Brazil are.
Of course, yeah.
So you know that they're good.
Yeah. So were you in sort of overseas Dubai area when sort of you saw that? Because obviously England fans watching that tournament in England obviously had to get up at whatever time. There's lots of stories of people having breakfast watching this particular game.
Yeah, similar for us in Dubai. I can't remember how many hours ahead, maybe about 2 or 3. So it was still, you know, fairly early morning, sort of in towards that lunchtime period. But I can, obviously, for us, it was a big deal. I think, you know, for us as fans, you know, especially for my brother and my dad, felt like we beat Brazil, we'll go on and potentially win this World Cup. So, you know, even I at sort of a young age knew that it was a big game. And I think that sort of love for England became almost instantaneous the minute that Michael Owen scored. And I can remember thinking, even as a sort of a 7-year-old, going, we're the best team in the world because we're beating Brazil. And I remember telling my dad that, turning around to him, and him just going, you haven't watched England enough.
Yes, because there was a few more events were to happen, weren't there?
Yeah, exactly. But, soul crushing as it was, as a very young lad, it sets you up nicely for the next however many years of disappointment, really. So, personally, I do believe that if we'd beaten Brazil in that game, I think we were the strongest team in that tournament, and we would have at least made that final. But that Brazil team was almost unbeatable, really.
Yeah, they were a special team, and yeah, to be fair, we had a good team at that time. We'd had a good run, getting to the finals eventually, because it came about after a bit of a hiccup on the way, but then obviously it all turned around with the famous England-Germany game. And then we went into the tournament. We drew with Sweden, beat Argentina, of course.
Beckham's penalty against Argentina.
Yes, then beat Denmark in the round of 16, and then on to that Brazil game. But great memories of that tournament. And I know
Rio Ferdinand's still dining off that header against Denmark that definitely wasn't his goal, really, but somehow has been credited to him to this day.
Yeah, I was there that night, and we were all doing the conga in the stands on a wet night in Japan. There, good memories. I mean, but bizarrely, that England-Brazil game, I was actually in the air coming home when that game was being played. Yeah, I just didn't time it right with the way it all was, and I didn't have the money to stay out there and watch it. So you saw that one. That was your first sort of introduction to watching England. Where did it go from there?
From there, we again moving overseas. My parents and my brother and sister had done it quite a bit before me. I'm a little bit younger than they are. My brother and sister, that is. Yeah. So actually, we ended up moving to, before Euro 2004. We ended up moving to Hong Kong for a few years, but actually in that period, so during sort of Euro 2004, World Cup 2006, we always would come home in the summer. So summer period for sort of anyone over in international sort of waters, you'd end up finishing school sort of late May, early June. So you'd end up coming back to the UK for those tournaments. So actually, Euro 2004, it started just as we were about to leave Dubai. So actually we ended up going back to the UK for part of it. But again, not got great recollections of that tournament, more so apart from Wayne Rooney being incredible, to be honest. And with my brother at that point, he was at university and he'd been in the UK for sort of a year or so properly at that point. So he'd seen Rooney loads on Match of the Day and things like that. So he was raving about this sort of 18-year-old that was, the next best thing. And obviously watching on YouTube now, you look at that tournament and you do think Rooney stays fit. Again, potentially you go on to win it. But I think sort of 2004, 2006, not got great memories.
It's a strange sort of time, wasn't it?
Yeah, very strange time.
But we had the, obviously, as you say, you mentioned the European Championships in Portugal. There was the World Cup in Germany. But there was always this sort of underlying sort of the team, wasn't it? It was, I mean, we all know it as the golden generation that just failed to deliver, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think they're almost a product of their own downfall. They just, I think, I know lots of people are divided on Southgate now, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk a little bit about that. But you feel that the way he's instilled a sort of a club mentality and a sort of what looks like a brotherly bond between the players. You wonder if someone in that sort of era could have maybe instilled that kind of belief into the players that we had then, because on paper you'd argue that team is still stronger than what we have now. But that's years gone by, and who knows what would be in that sense. So
brotherly bond. I like that phrase. Sounds good. If only that Gareth had been able to be sort of manager and go back in time.
Yeah, exactly.
So a one for what is it? Doctor Who? Is it Doctor Who that goes back in time? They can go into
my brother-in-law is a big Doctor Who fan, so I'm sure if he ever hears this, he'll love the fact that there's a mention about Doctor Who on it.
Gareth Southgate in the TARDIS.
Yeah.
That period of time, and then there was obviously the failure to get to the Euros of 2008, wasn't there? With Steve McLaren.
Yeah, the Wally with the Brolly, unfortunately, and being a Derby fan, I've got good fond memories of Steve McLaren since then. So,
of course, yeah.
To me, he's again, I think just that era wasn't great for him. But by 2008, we were actually, as me, my mum and dad were actually living in Spain at that point. So I've got fond memories of the year 2008 for other reasons, because Spain obviously ended up going on to win it as they did in 2010 in that World Cup, which again for England was a sour note. But living in Spain at the time, seeing, a team that, essentially built up over a number of years to that point was actually good, fond memories. Although for England, it was absolutely abysmal. But
yeah, no, I understand that. I get that. You've sort of got to see an international side win a tournament from that perspective, being on their soil. Yeah, that'd be good. So coming back and forth and being all around the world, I guess you hadn't really had a chance to see the team other than on the telly. Would that be right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and again, more so when we ended up moving to Spain in about 2007. So in 2007, Sky was a lot more readily available. There was, with being in Europe as well, you can get some, I'm sure they're probably not want to hear that, but you can get people who can fit a dish. So you can get Sky overseas and things like that. So we were able to get more football. So actually watching England was much, much easier, much more regularly available. But yeah, I mean, my first game was when we moved back to the UK in 2011. I think it was November, which was England against Spain, actually. So, in theory, at that point, they were world champions, all conquering. And I remember before the game, my dad actually, I sprained my ankle playing rugby the night before, thinking I wouldn't be able to go because I could barely walk. And my dad was taking me, and he basically turned around and said, "Well, you're coming because we've paid a lot of money for these tickets. Even if you can't walk, you're coming." So, hobbled through the pain, but going into Wembley for the first time, even at 16, it's unlike any other stadium I think I've ever been in, especially at night time. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People's memories of Wembley or their first impressions of Wembley are always really good to hear, because you sort of see that arch as you come across it and sort of everyone around you. And you say an evening game just sort of makes it just that little bit more special under the lights. Yeah. It's such a bit of a cliche, really, but it is true.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. I mean, the game was as England were through, between 2008 and 2017, pretty bang average and fairly dreadful to watch. I mean, we won the game 1-0, but it was a Frank Lampard header across, hit the post, and I think Darren Bent scored from about half a yard as the ball bounced across the line. So
okay,
it was, even though it was terrible, I've still got great memories of it happening because I was in line with the goal. So, it's still even though it was rubbish to watch, it's still a great mememory. So
absolutely, there's certainly worse games to have a first one attending. People have worse games that they went to for their first England game. But I mean, speaking of worst England games, I mean, to take us to that one. I mean, there's a few you can pick, but go on.
I mean, honourable mentions would be England against Germany in 2010. That was pretty bad. And then, to be honest, England against Italy in Euro 2012, that was particularly bad because I think, honestly, Italy should have put us out of our misery long before it got to penalties because we were rubbish in that game as well. And then my first year at uni, 2014, was awful. My brother had seen, England win the Rugby World Cup when he was at uni, and I thought, great, I'm at uni, it's going to be fantastic. Got 3 years of sport, and every year was rubbish for England. So, which led to my final year at uni, and probably the worst game of all time, England against Iceland.
Oh dear, yes. Oh, I can imagine a lot of uni students all watching that together in a student halls or something, and a lot of expletives being thrown about there.
Yeah. By that point, I mean, obviously, quite a few of my mates were still there, but I just finished, and I was actually I was back down in London visiting my now wife, but she was my girlfriend at the time, and sitting in her front room with her brother, and they're half Italian, so I think they'd watched Italy, Spain even earlier in the day where Italy won, so they were on a lovely old high, and I thought, here we go, nice simple 3-0, 4-0 win against Iceland. First 3 minutes, Rooney scores a penalty. You think, there you go, settle the nerves, and then in all honesty, I think her mum and dad might have thought that I probably wasn't the right person for her, because I definitely used a few expletives, I think, because single-handedly is the worst game of football I think I've watched England play, and that includes England against Hungary last year.
Oh yes, another one there. Yeah, we've got a few to pick from, haven't we? Yeah, but I mean, hopefully one day, he says this with like fingers crossed, it'll all be worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the suffering.
Yes, so all those games that we think, oh, Iceland, Hungary, Germany, never mind, we've won a trophy. That's still to come. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get there eventually. But I mean, obviously, we nearly got there the other year during the Euros. How were the Euros for you? Where did you watch those?
So the Euros, this tournament in particular, has a really special place, in my memory, and also at the time. I mean, me and my two mates, who I'll probably go on to talk about a little bit later on, Dan and Jack. We all work in the NHS, and with the lockdowns, COVID, it'd been a long sort of year and a bit, having the Euros sort of coming into that 2020 summer, thinking, oh, great, the Euros, at least we've got some tournament football to go ahead, and then it gets cancelled, it's pushed back a year. You just sort of have that constant feeling of nothing's ever gonna be the same again. We're never gonna get to do any of this kind of stuff. So actually, for the tournament itself, we ended up, because you could only go in groups of 6, or maybe even at that point, maybe groups of 8, but you couldn't have lots of people even in pubs in sort of 2021. So I kind of just made the point of, let's not bother trying to book places, because everyone will be trying to do that, and we'll then potentially have people that can't come, people that can come. So I kind of said, let's watch the first game, because it happened to be on my birthday. Let's watch the first game at mine. We'll do a barbecue, nice weather. Let's just watch the first game against Croatia here. We won. Can't remember, looking at a game where I thought, fine, it was 1-0, but we were comfortable, and actually that was a good result. So we then ended up watching the second game against Scotland at my mate Jack's house. I'm sure he'll be ecstatic that I'm mentioning this on this podcast. That game was an absolute dull affair. We were terrible. They were terrible. It was a
stinker, wasn't it?
It was an absolute stinker. And I think both me and Dan turned to him and went, well, that settles that then. We're watching the rest of it at Matt's house. So so we watched every game at ours, definitely with the two boys. But then a few other people that came sort of mixed and matched depending on days they could come and stuff like that. So, tried to have barbecue food all the time. The weather was nice. And I think just it ended in bitter disappointment. Well, for me, as I said, my wife's half Italian. So I think for her, she kept going, well, I've won either way. And I'm very much going, yep, that's fine. It doesn't make it any less painful. But, for ending on a painful note, seeing England get to a final, which I never thought would ever happen, was one fantastic highlight. But just after a year and a half of generally awful work, it was a really nice release.
Yes.
So lovely sort of memory for that point of view, and especially with my two mates who, following that, we've not only bonded over football. We went away to Tenerife for a week at the start of the World Cup this last year. So to get a bit of sun and go sit in the pubs and stuff. So we've kind of built an even bigger friendship out of this.
Nice one. I mean, and then are they England fans as well?
Yeah. So Jack, for his sins, is a Manchester United fan. But when we first met, we were actually sort of sitting in the staff room at work, and we kind of got talking about football, and then we ended up going to a Christmas party together and kind of got talking more about football, and he kind of sort of basically said that Man United were rubbish at the time, and I remember thinking, oh, that's a sensible Manchester United fan. You don't get tons of them lurking about these days. I'm sure I'll get pelters for this if people are listening to it. But we kind of just hit it off. We're very similar people, and we kind of bonded at that point. And then the World Cup rolled around 6 months later. But just before that, we watched, the playoff final. We had a whole day of sport of watching stuff in the pub, kind of just me and him. And then a few people joined us later on for the Champions League final. We kind of bonded there. And then because of that, we've tried watching pretty much every game at the 2018 World Cup together. And, we were 7 pints deep before the Croatia game because we were nervous. So we've kind of sort of had a similar journey. Yeah. And then my mate Dan sort of came in a little bit later. So he joined work, and we met him sort of, Jack met him first and then introduced him to me. And definitely for his sins, I mean, he is a Leeds United fan, so he's definitely got some sins there.
So you've got a Leeds and a Man United fan in your
and a Derby County fan, and most people, we were on holiday in Tenerife, and people couldn't quite believe we were all stood together in our club kits, to be honest. So
this is the thing with following England; it brings us all together, doesn't it?
Exactly. But Dan was very much. I don't care about international football. I'm a Carlin man. I won't have any other type of beer. That kind of individual. And
we've all got a friend like that.
Exactly. And over a period of time, we've managed to indoctrinate him into England football, to the point now where he's watching under 21 England games and messaging me asking about them. So it's nice. It's good to have.
Excellent stuff. I mean, to watch the World Cup in Tenerife was a good idea. I wish I'd have thought about doing something like that, because World Cups are often associated with sort of summertime, and obviously Qatar was in our winter time. So yeah, that good one going over to Tenerife for that. Was it good over there? Was it sort of good atmosphere with other England fans watching it?
Yeah, I mean, I know that. There was, to be honest, there was quite a mixed bag. There was, while we were out there, we saw a few Danish fans, a few Germans, a few Polish fans. There was an absolute ton of Welsh fans, even in the sort of area where we were staying. I know there was a big incident sort of further up the road between England and Welsh fans before we ended up playing each other in the group stage. Oh, right. And we weren't, fortunately, we weren't involved in any of that, but we were sort of in the town, sort of next to it. But yeah, it was really good, actually. I think, although watching England and seeing the Iran game was fantastic, and the USA game, again, a bit like the Scotland game, was a bit of a dull, stressful affair, which didn't feel like it needed to be. But personally, one of the biggest highlights for the three of us was, I think it was before Wales' second game against Iran. We were, all three of us sat there, England kits on, waiting for the USA game later in the evening, and we were surrounded by about 60 Welsh fans, and they stood up, all sung the national anthem and belted out, and things like that were really nice to see. Although, secretly didn't want them to beat Iran anyway. So, but things like that were nice to be out there. There was a good atmosphere. There wasn't lots of. I know there was that one incident, but it felt quite safe and secure, which was nice, and it was good weather and stuff. So it was nice to go out there with the two of them.
Nice one. I wish I'd have thought of that one. But yeah, he came back to carry on watching it back home in the cold and the dark. World Cup Qatar, it was going so well, obviously, until France, didn't it?
Yeah, I think Croatia 2018 was painful. Italy 2021 was painful. I feel the France game hurts more because I feel like against Croatia and Italy, we weren't the team we were in that quarterfinal. And if we'd been the team we were in that quarterfinal, we'd have won both those games.
Right, yeah.
I feel like the teams progressed. I know that we had an average sort of between March and September with the Nations League and things like that, but it felt like we were a team that knew our identity. We knew what we were wanting to do. I know the USA game was a bit drab as well, but that France game I feel hurts more on the fact that we looked like we looked the better team. I still think if we score that, I know if Kane scores that penalty, and again, I'm sure people will have different opinions. Personally, he's the only person that should be taking the penalty. I think we probably take them in extra time. I think we nullified Mbappe. I thought we were the better team. And I think that's why it hurts more, but also gives a good sense of hope and positivity that actually we can go on and do more and be better. Those players will be more experienced. They'll be ready for another tournament. They're young players. So hopefully that experience of losing to a top team like France, and they are a top team, you know, they've made 4 of the last 7 World Cup finals. So they are the team, in theory, of the last 20 years. And having that experience will hopefully make those players that bit better.
You'd think so. Let's hope so.
It was sad. It was the only game, sadly, that me, Dan, and Jack didn't watch together, and I think I'm blaming myself for that because it was a Christmas party that I was at. So I blame myself for us losing because up until that point we've been all right. So you
were watching it whilst supposed to be having a Christmas party.
Yeah, it didn't go down particularly well with a few of the lasses that had organised it, but I had explained maybe about 3 months before that they picked the Christmas party date on the most likely day that England would play in the quarterfinal, and if that did happen, nobody who likes football was going to enjoy the party until that game was over. So fortunately, they did manage to. It was a barn somewhere up in the countryside as well, so it was like really out of the way and not no big TV. So fortunately, we managed to get a stream up on someone's iPad. So we were about 30 seconds behind. So people kept getting texts off of people saying, Kane scored, or we've got another penalty, which was a bit frustrating, but eventually made the point of no one to look at their phones, just let the game happen. So it was decent. And then fortunately felt sad for about 5 minutes. And then someone started asking for shots. So, that helped numb the pain quite quickly.
I'm sure it did. Yeah, a few shots here and there. And the football's done. Christmas was on the horizon.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it still hurts to this day. But, I mean, going forward, and obviously you mentioned Gareth Southgate, I'm very much in the Gareth Southgate in camp, if we're still having this conversation. Yeah. I still think he's the main man for the job, because I don't think there's anyone at this moment in time that can do any better job, in all honesty. I mean, is that kind of how you feel going forwards?
I think so. I think there's, like I said at the start, there's a lot of, when football is so easily and readily available now, that you can go onto YouTube and you can pick up your highlights and you see, and the club game is so massive that people who've grown up watching the Premier League have an idea that is how football should be played, regardless of whether it's international, club, or whatever. And that's just not how it works. You look at the teams that have won major tournaments. They've, Germany in 2014, 5 of that team were from their under-21 team in 2009. Yes, they were all fantastic footballers, but they've grown up playing together and have built sort of that, like I was saying, that sort of brotherly bond. They are a team, they are together to go into an international side. And that's what I would say Southgate's done particularly well. He's made England feel more like a club side. Fine, not in the way that they necessarily play football, but the fact that the players want to be there. Like, you can see it when, prime example is Harry Maguire. I know there's a lot of people that do not like Maguire, and, I don't think he's necessarily helped himself with some of his performances for Man United in particular.
Yeah.
But when he plays for England, he hasn't put a foot wrong. Pretty much the only one that I can think of is against Italy, and off the top of my head is against Italy in March, where he tries to run it out with it and they end up scoring the goal that gets them sort of back into it at 2-1 in Naples. But he's generally been a good player. And I think Southgate, for me, I'm still very much Southgate in. I think he's definitely deserving of another go around with these players. I know lots of people keep saying bring someone else in and they'll help let the players take their foot off the pedal. And it's like, what does that mean? And who are you bringing in? No one ever has a name to bring in instead.
Yeah.
So I think personally for me, I think he's definitely deserves another go. I think he's, and I think a big part of why I think I love this England team, and again, why lots of people love this England team at the moment, is that Gareth Southgate, the way he portrays himself, is the best of what this country has. And because of that, the players are the best of what this country has now. You know, people are loving the players who play for England because they come across as, well-informed. They fight generally the right causes, and they're all around come across as just generally nice guys. And I think that's a big thing of what I love about this England team now. And that stems from Southgate.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think, you're saying the right things there about the players. It just is a more, in sort of the world that we live in, it's very much like the players that are playing now are very sort of different in their attitudes to maybe say the players that were playing in 1990 or sort of the 2002 World Cup. They are very different, and they need to be brought on differently. And Gareth is in the right place at the right time, I think. Yeah,
I agree.
So, I mean, just in the short time that we've got left, I mean, do you get to go to Wembley often? Have you been abroad to watch England?
Sadly not been abroad to watch England. I think now I'm one of the Traveller Supporters Club members, and would like to get out to somewhere else for one of the games. I'm probably not going to get out now definitely won't be able to get out for Ukraine. It's the week of my wife's birthday, so that's an absolute no-go. And the one I would have wanted to do would have been the Malta game, but I think when just timing-wise it didn't quite work out. Applied, put in for the ballot and wasn't anywhere near. But over the next sort of few months, taking sort of the annual leave, me, Jack and Dan in particular, our goal now is to try and, even if necessarily we don't get any games, we'd like to still go to Germany for the experience for the tournament.
Yes.
But because of that, we've signed up to the STC and we're sort of taking our annual leave, trying to get down from Leeds, and Dan's up in Newcastle at the moment, trying to get down for as many of the games as we can. So I think I'm off to over the sort of the week off to Australia and then Italy, which will happen to be my wife's first ever game of football. And being half Italian, she keeps sort of making the point of, I can support both teams. I was like, you definitely can't support both teams when we're in the England home end. Like, you cannot do that. And then again, trying to get down for the Malta game and stuff as well in November. So definitely more on that criteria. It's more the home games, but would love to do an away game. I think, seeing Naples back in March was just looked like some atmosphere, which would have been fantastic to go out there as well. Yeah,
no, it was a good one there. And just thinking there of your wife being half Italian, I always look at people with half and half scarves and think, no, what have you got one of those for? But but if someone is half English, half Italian, then I think they're the most entitled to wear a half and half scarf. So that game is ideal for her when she goes there. Treat her to a half and half scarf.
I might have to. It's Matt, fine. If anyone threatens us, it'll be me taking the punch, so it'll be fine.
Matt, thank you very much for joining us and just taking us through your England journey. I mean, just obviously plenty more time to go. Hopefully we can, maybe next year you'll be out there in Germany and see us lift a trophy.
Absolutely, hope so. Who knows? Perennial hope is forever on the cards being an England fan.
Isn't it just? We all know that one.
Absolutely.
Thank you to Matt there. Really enjoyed that. As I mentioned beforehand, if you fancy sharing your England journey, by all means, get in touch. 3lionspodcast@gmail.com or on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads. Just search 3 Lions Podcast. I'd love to hear of your journey. Now, before I end this episode, I just wanted to pay tribute to Francis Lee, or Franny Lee, as he was more commonly known as. Franny passed away on the 2nd of October, aged 79, after a prolonged fight against cancer. He'll be widely regarded as one of Manchester City's finest. Born on the 29th of April 1944 in West Horton in Lancashire, he began his career at Bolton Wanderers, scoring 92 times in 189 games. He then moved to Manchester City in 1967 for £60,000, where he would play 249 times, scoring 112 times, and it was there that he won the First Division title, the FA Cup, the League Cup, and also the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup. And then finished his playing career at Derby County between 1974 and 1976. And he would eventually become Manchester City's chairman in 1994. And that was way before the club became the club we now know. He was first selected to represent England by Sir Alf Ramsey in 1968. Made his debut in a 1-1 draw at home to Bulgaria. He went on to win 27 caps and scored 10 goals, and also appeared at the 1970 Mexico World Cup. His first England goal came in his second game, a 5-0 victory over France.
Hurst was in great form, so was Lee. He scored an exhibition goal to put England 4 up. This was the England everyone had waited to see.
Later, he would score against Ecuador in a pre-World Cup friendly in Quito.
Newton and Lee going in fast. A goal for Francis Lee. Quick piece of opportunist running then by Francis Lee. The Ecuadorians stunned by the lax defence that allowed Lee to get in on top of them. Francis Lee scoring his 6th international goal, adding another one to the cracking good goal he scored against Wales at Cardiff last month. And what's more important, it's put English spirits very high here in Quito. 1-0 up then England are.
I'd like to send my condolences to all his family and friends. I'll be back with you very soon with a preview episode ahead of the Australia and Italy games. I hope you can join me for those. So until then, take care of yourselves. Cheers.